I'm Grace Comfort. I'm from the class of 2021. My tip for incoming ninth graders is to always be kinder than you need to be. Always have courage, compassion, and connection within your lives, and never stop questioning.
Welcome to this episode of the Ninth Grade Experience podcast. We have another Throwback Freshman episode here. As we're kind of getting closer to the end of this school year, we're reaching out to seniors that are getting ready to graduate, and we're asking them to look back on their ninth grade year, because when they were freshmen, we didn't have this podcast, so they didn't have the chance to come on as freshmen. So we're taking a look back and kind of getting them to look back on their ninth grade year and to give our upcoming eighth graders and our current ninth graders some words of wisdom here in their final days here at Emmaus High School. So today we're focusing on Grace Comfort, who was used as one of our Emmaus High School grad spotlight students. So I think her initial thing went up in early April. So if you're on social media, you got a chance to see that, and we'll get a chance to go all through Grace's bio and all sorts of cool stuff in a minute. But Grace, thanks so much for taking some time to come on with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is the part where we get to brag about you a little bit. I'm going to read right off the picture here. So hopefully that's all correct, and I'm sure it is. So this is where you get to, we toot your horn a little bit here. So you're the president of the PALS group, which is Peers Assisting Learning Support. And you did a podcast episode with the Stinger as well too, where you talked all about that group and organization. So after you're done listening to this one, go listen to the Stinger episode with you talking about PALS. You were part of your student government association secretary. You were a school board representative. You were part of the Interact Club, a Hornet ambassador, a freshman mentor, a tutor coordinator, NHS, junior board member at Camelot for Children. You dance in the Performing Arts Center of the Lehigh Valley, and you are intending to go to Lafayette College for psychology in the fall. That is a mouthful. You must have been busy all of your time here at Emmaus High School. So pretty impressive resume. So looking back on it right now, it must be a blur to think of all the cool stuff you did while you were here.
It was a total blur. But to be honest, I wouldn't change anything for the world. I'm kind of like a busy bee, so I enjoy being busy. I enjoy doing things that kind of fill me with joy, and a lot of things, and I touched on it in the previous podcast about PALS, but a lot of what fills me with joy and kind of sparks me is helping other people and giving them opportunities that I have been given. So doing a lot of work with Interact, with PALS, with Camelot, outside of the school and stuff has been really helpful for my own personal growth, but also just kind of sparking joy in myself as well as others. So something that I definitely look forward to taking with me as I move on from Emmaus.
And that's really cool that you mentioned all those different things. And we're going to get into that. And you have a really unique story. And we're going to, obviously, since we're on the ninth grade experience here, we're going to go back to that ninth grade year a little bit. So I'm going to just ask you the same question I ask everybody at the start of the podcast here. If you're a first time guest, to describe your ninth grade experience. And just kind of give us, what you remember from it. Like, what were some key events? I know there's a much larger backstory to your ninth grade year that we'll get into, but we'll see kind of the big summary that you give, and then we'll kind of drill down with some specific stuff as well too. But what was your ninth grade experience like?
Awesome. So I know you mentioned that we'll go into it a little bit later, but I'll just give like a small little background. So at the end of my eighth grade year, I was identified with dyslexia, and that was something that I had no idea that I had. I struggled my entire school age life, and I didn't know. And so I ended up, after being tested a few different times, I ended up kind of taking matters into my own hands, and I researched on my own, and I found dyslexia online and was like, oh, this is kind of funny. This fits everything I've been experiencing and all these feelings and all these experiences that I've had. So then, we'll kind of fast forward. I brought that to my parents. We went and we got tested again, and it came back very clear that I'm very dyslexic. And so that was like a whirlwind starting ninth grade with that. That was a whole new experience. I was getting an individual education program, or an IEP, for the first time. But I also was a normal ninth grader, nervous to go into the school, find my way, find my friends. So I started off probably a little bit more rocky than maybe most people would. But throughout the year, I was able to encounter so many great teachers, friend groups, and I was able to kind of find my footing and kind of find where I fit in. So even though it kind of came with like a whirlwind of a start. I definitely felt like throughout the year, I was able to find points of how to be grounded within the year.
And I think that's a really interesting point that you raise, and kind of finding those things. And the cool part about your story is you took it upon yourself to do a lot of the research going into that ninth grade year about what is dyslexia and those kinds of things. So for people that are listening, and your best, you've done a lot of research, you know how to describe it. And there are lots of different forms of dyslexia. So it's not like, there's one definition of what that is. Can you explain to people listening, like what is dyslexia and maybe what specifically how it impacts you? Because like I said, it does impact everybody differently. But what did you find out about yourself, and what part of dyslexia do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me personally, dyslexia for me basically affects my letter and sound correspondence. So I don't have the pathways in my brain to be able to correspond like a letter of seek, like that type of situation, that correspondence between the sounds that the letter makes, I don't have. And so for me, I found out through my own research, and it was confirmed very much through educational testing, is that I memorize everything. So when I read, I'm not reading off of understanding the sounds that blend together when letters are presented together in a way to form a word. My brain does not process that way. So for me, I just understood, okay, the word the, THE, that's what that looks like. And that is what that word is. And this is what that word means. And so I read and do a lot off of memorization. So for me, if I see in biology honors, it's an organism, it's a word that I've never seen before. I can't just sound the letter out or sound the word out because I don't physically have the pathways in my brain to understand the sounds going together. And so that's the main reason, and the main reason, I guess, for why I struggled for so long and how it affects the majority of my reading and spelling.
And so you kind of started figuring that, was there like an event like in middle school or like in eighth grade, like that you kind of eventually figured out, hey, there's something not right, or that I'm struggling in a way that maybe I shouldn't be struggling with that kind of stuff. And then it kind of empowered you to start taking a look at it and researching it?
Yes. So in middle school, we did a project. Certain classes did it. It was called Genius Hour. And if I recall correctly, I believe it was during our science time in middle school. And so basically it was free reign. You got to pick any topic that you wanted. And then from that topic, you could just research it. And then at the end of the year, you would perform a nice big, kind of real presentation as a middle schooler. And so I kind of was someone that always knew that I was different, but then in quotes, always knew that I kind of learned differently, perceived the world differently. And I was always very intrigued by that. I wanted to figure out why. I wanted to, help myself. There was a level of fear going into high school for me of, am I going to be looked at differently? How am I going to be able to be in higher level classes that I so badly want to be in? But if I can't spell basic words, and if I can't read basic text, how am I supposed to thrive in these higher classes? So there was that level of fear and also a lot of curiosity around kind of my own struggles. So then through Genius Hour, I was able to say, okay, I'm going to start with a broad topic. Okay, learning disabilities or learning differences. And then I kind of researched different ones from there. Okay, well, my experience has been issues with reading. Okay, so learning differences within reading. And then I kind of just narrowed it down, and it led myself to dyslexia. And then I ended up doing research on dyslexia, doing a presentation on dyslexia. And then I basically took that research and furthered it even more for me personally. And then that led to finally being diagnosed with dyslexia. So that was the sparking point for me to start my own research and being my own advocate.
Just out of curiosity, do you have that project still? Was it like a video you had to produce at the end? So you still have that, and kind of, do you ever look back on it and think wow, that's pretty, it's pretty amazing work for an eighth grader. I work with students with disabilities as part of my normal work here at the MAS high school. And there are so many times where they don't, and this is a common thing amongst lots of students, they don't understand the things that they have going on. So it makes it extremely difficult. But you as an eighth grader kind of took it upon yourself to do lots of research on a topic. And dyslexia is not something that is a common issue that we deal with here at the high school for students. It's not, we don't see that a lot. We don't talk about it a lot, but it's there. So it's really interesting that you took this upon yourself to kind of really become an expert in the topic at an 8th grade level. It's curious, like, do you ever like look back on that project and be like, wow, I did amazing work for 8th grade?
Yeah, honest time. I have it in my little Google Drive, and basically what I ended up doing was I had like one master document where I put a bunch of my research, and then I formed like a presentation, and then I stood up in front of the class and I kind of like lectured, and so that was kind of like my style of how I presented the project. And so for me, I look back at it all the time because it grounds me. It kind of reminds me of research that I'm interested in, maybe personally. It also kind of reminds me of, you know what, like I am worthy, and like I have the ability to do great things because I started with this, and I can go forward with new things, and so can other people. And so I love looking back at my old research, and it is something that I am very proud of, and I would love to help other people with.
So coming in, so you had all this knowledge coming into 8th grade, and coming into 9th grade, and you kind of talked at the beginning, like not only were you dealing with like the normal 9th grade transition stuff, you're dealing with like this brand new knowledge of like, hey, I'm going to have to learn entirely different. I have to readjust. I want to be in these harder classes, like you just said, and I'm trying to figure out that. So like, what was it during that 9th grade year that you were able to do? And I know you said you were dealing with having an IEP for the first time, like the end of 8th grade coming into 9th grade. So what was that whole like year like for you, and kind of like figuring out not only yourself as like just a regular 14, 15-year-old student coming in, but like having to deal with all these other things and kind of figuring out like how to make yourself a successful student here at the high school?
For me, honestly, it was one of the most empowering moments of my life. Finally having a label, and I know there's a lot of different opinions about labeling students, but in my experience, it has been one of the greatest gifts that I've ever been given in my life. Having a label and having a reason for why I struggled really allowed me to flourish individually as a person. It allowed me to grow a lot in self-esteem and confidence. So for me, I took my 9th grade year, and I took kind of being able to have an IEP, being able to have that previous knowledge, like we mentioned, and I allowed that knowledge to be my power. And so for me, if I didn't have that knowledge, I don't know. I don't know what my experience in high school would have been like. I don't think I would have really been able to be successful in a lot of the classes that I've taken. And so kind of like some strategy tools that I developed was being my own advocate, being open about my struggles, because realizing that we all have struggles and everyone's struggles may not look different than mine, but mine aren't going to look the same as theirs. And so really finding confidence in that label, and not letting that label define me, but also allowing that label to give me strength, and knowing that there's things I can't control and there's things that I can control. And what I can control is what I'm going to run with and what I'm going to use as my strength. So I really try to kind of help people kind of own their weaknesses, one may say. I think it's a strength, but own kind of the abilities that you were given, and take it as your responsibility and move forward.
And the word advocacy used is like one of those buzzwords we talk about all the time,
Yes.
especially during this school year. Teachers and everyone was encouraging everybody to be an advocate for themselves, because obviously if you're remote, you weren't in the building, we didn't know what was going on. So what did that word advocate mean for you as like a 9th grader, as learning to do that? Like, what did advocacy look like during that year for you? Again, like thinking for like a 9th grader or upcoming 9th grader listening to this, like how would they take that word or take that idea and apply it to what they're doing as a 9th grader?
So for me personally, and I recommend this a lot to like incoming 9th graders or just people in general, I always try to form a connection with whoever I'm working with. So in this case, teachers, I enjoy connection. Connection is something that I strive to have in all aspects of my life. And so for me, 9th grade, that looked like shooting an email to each of my teachers saying, "Hi, I'm Grace. It's really nice to meet you. I'm really excited to be in your class. Here's my situation. I have an IEP, but I'm extremely independent. I've never had an IEP before, so we're going to learn together. And I really want to have an open line of communication throughout this entire year. And I would love to find ways that we can work together so we both can feel successful. And so it's just kind of a lot of going back and forth, either through email, or I love, like, during ninth grade, I loved being able to find time during my study halls, and if those aligned with my teachers, and just kind of talking with them during my study halls, even during lunches, and just trying to form that connection, and hopefully help to kind of find ways to be successful together.
And here, it's a weird question, but did somebody teach you those advocacy skills? Like, because to me, that's like a really, like, for you to take the initiative to write the email and to you to reach out and say, hey, this is me, this is putting it on the table. That's like such a huge accomplishment for a ninth grader. I was just curious, was somebody like coaching you along, or did you just decide I got to do, this is what I'm doing?
Yeah. So for me, it was really purely out of survival. Since I didn't get identified until the end of 8th grade, and I wanted to succeed and I wanted to do well, I take a lot of pride in my academics and a lot of pride in kind of the work that I put out. And so I kind of had this moment basically throughout my entire life of, okay, well, the system is not adapting to me, so I am going to adapt for it. And so it was just one of those moments where I was like, well, if I'm not going to get help, this was prior to being, identified. If I wasn't going to get help and I wasn't going to get the services that I needed, then I was going to say, okay, this is the situation that I'm in, and I really want to succeed, and I really want to do well, and overall, I want to learn. So let's work together to learn. And so I feel like I've always done that, especially prior to being identified. So then once I was identified, it was like, okay, this is a piece of cake. Like, I've been doing this my entire life, and here's documentation that supports reasons why. And so it was honestly such a relief. And maybe we could get into this, maybe we don't have to, up to you. But I realized, and this was the last few years, I've really realized this as I've kind of, grown throughout the years, personally, as well as just academically. Prior to being identified, I dealt with a lot of shame. I didn't understand like why I was experiencing all these struggles. And I internalized that and thought that I was doing something wrong. I was bad. I was a mistake, X, Y, and Z. And so being able to kind of advocate for myself was an avenue for me to say, okay, like, here, like, I have the power, I have the control, I can do this. And so it was a very confidence boosting time for me, and was really like a great way for me to kind of grow as a person throughout ninth grade.
And you saying that is such a big thing of like you taking the initiative, you wanting to grow, you kind of working through all these different things. It's really amazing to me listening to your story of like kind of how you took control of this. You took control of the narrative. And I say that to people all the time is like, the story, either control the story or the story controls you. And you've decided to take control of the story. And even going back, like having that specific thing that you can go back and say, like, I thought I struggled before. I didn't know why, but now that you have the specific thing, I think, and kind of talking to Mrs. Connect and some other people, like, and, learning a little bit more about you, you were able to kind of then, like you said, kind of everything wasn't necessarily going to adapt to you. You were able to adapt to other things. And we'll talk about some of the strategies that you use in the classroom and other stuff, because I think that would be interesting to students as well, too. But I think like one of the things you were saying there about, not feeling as worthy and all those things. We've had some other episodes where we've had students that have had disabilities kind of talk about like things kind of related to that, where, it's not negative on you. It's just a difference of way that you have to learn and overcoming that and kind of figuring out how you fit in. So for you to be able to do that, I think it speaks volumes of kind of the situation and kind of taking that and looking at it not necessarily as a negative, because you could have definitely gone another way with this. You could have been like, I have all these things, but now somebody told me I can't read as well as, my peers, or I can't understand things the same way. Well, guess what? I guess I don't have to do that anymore. And then just totally shut down, but you went the opposite direction.
And honestly, I do have to say that I come from like a very privileged position, and I have extreme supportive people around me. So I kind of have to point out that if I didn't have like wonderful parents and wonderful teachers and wonderful friends around me, I truly believe I would have been the statistic of the underrepresented dyslexic that gets pushed along, and then ends up somewhere that they're not supposed to be. I can't remember the statistic right now, but there is an astonishing number of undiagnosed dyslexics that are actually in prison. And think about it. Like if your self-esteem is so low and your confidence is so low and you think that you're not worthy of X, Y, and Z, then why not go and do something and, end up in prison or end up in a situation that you're not supposed to. So I really have kind of the privilege of like my parents and I've been tutored since 4th grade. Every single summer I tutor throughout the year. I was able to get independent testing. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of resources that a lot of people don't have. So if I didn't have that privilege, I don't know where I would have been, so where I would be. So I'd really like to kind of like tip my hat and point out to all the supporters around me that have supported me and will continue to support me. And I'm extremely grateful for all those people.
And again, like, I think this is like one of the things that's really showing is like your humility throughout this whole thing too, is just like, you're right. There's a lot of people that go into all these different programs and the planning and those things as well too. And hopefully, I think that's one of the the newly emerging things here at the high school is we're having students come up with dyslexia in all different forms, and how do we help accommodate those students and the different accommodations we can give them, or the different tools and strategies, because once you get out of here, you kind of have to know on your own. And obviously you're going to a prestigious college here in a little bit. So obviously the learning doesn't stop on June 13th.
Oh.
Like it's going to get just as hard. And we'll get into like the college stuff kind of
Absolutely.
as you move forward. But so Mrs. Connect was telling me a couple of your strategies here and kind of how you take notes and how you have circles and highlighters and all sorts of stuff. So if you can, let's get down to like the actual like brass tacks here. So like what were some of the strategies that you implemented for yourself? We have the label, we have the, what that means, how to, what you need to do. So if you were sitting in, I don't know, you said honors biology, so I'll just use honors biology. So what did you actually do to help yourself and kind of guide your own learning in that environment?
So I do a lot of things, and I do a lot of kind of funky things that I never realized were funky until I got into high school and got into all these classes and was like, oh, no one else is doing that. So some of the things, which is just funny, like to me, it makes me laugh. Like I kind of like it. I like that I learn differently. I think it's cool. And I think it gives me a perspective that I wouldn't otherwise have. So some things that I do is I'm a huge audiobook reader. So I have a program that I was able to get, and it audio reads all of my textbooks. So I have the book in front of me, but I'm listening in my headphones, all of my textbooks. And that's huge. First of all, it cuts my time down, like outlining and reading in classes, by like half. My comprehension would be like off the roofs because I can actually read it and actually understand what's happening. So that's amazing. So that's one of the biggest things that I do. But kind of some things that you mentioned with the highlighting and circling, my tests, it's actually really funny. A lot of teachers kind of like chuckle when they grade my test because I'm a huge writing in the margin type of gal. And so sometimes some teachers in the past have actually like enlarged the font so there's more room on the margins of the test, because what I'll do is I'll like circle, like let's just say it's a regular multiple choice question. So I'll circle like the main part of the question, I'll like arrow over, and then I'll brain dump like all the information I can remember about that question. And then through the information that I wrote on the margins, I try to match that up to one of the answers in the multiple choice. So that's like a fun thing that I feel like a lot of people don't do that I've always done. I also, in like word problems for math, I'll do the boxing around the important information. I'll color code just to try to kind of form those connections in my brain that maybe don't naturally happen for me, but may naturally happen for someone else. So those are kind of two main things that I do. I also do just like a bunch of other things. Like I sit close to the teacher up in the front. I would say those are probably the main things that I do. I also lean incredibly into my curiosity, which is something that, again, was kind of squandered in the beginning, but through this experience, specifically through my 9th grade year, I was able to be really empowered by my curiosity. I'm an inquisitive person. I love asking questions. I'm constantly curious about everything. And for me, I found that that's an incredible tool for me to learn by being like, oh, why is that like that? Or, oh, can you explain the reason why we're doing this? For me, like specifically in math, if I don't understand the reason why we're doing a step or a move within the problem, I'm most likely not going to understand the concept or remember it. So asking those questions about content and reasons why is like a huge part of my learning process and how I can really identify if I'm truly digesting and understanding material.
And just listening to that, the stuff that you said, none of it is like out of crazy out of bounds. Like it's all stuff that any student, dyslexia, not dyslexia, can all do. It's not like you're like, getting some sort of like magic pen. I know they have
Nope.
stuff like that that reads.
Those
It's
are
like,
cool.
yeah, those are pretty cool. But like, there's not anything that you are doing that's like, it draws specific attention to yourself. We all listen to audiobooks. It's like, 2021. So listen to an audiobook if you don't, like, seriously.
It's
But
amazing.
like none of it is things that are like gonna make you stick out or identify you in any sort of way. So like was that ever part of like when you were trying to come up with these strategies, like also being a high school girl and not wanting to like stick out as is just kind of wanting to blend into the crowd, but also knowing that you have these different things? Was there ever any thought about not having something that's like, oh, here comes Grace, she needs
Yeah.
this, like that kind of stuff?
And I mean, that's actually a really interesting point and an important point that we're talking about now. I've actually had a huge transition in the way that I look at receiving help and receiving either accommodations or just support. I think in the beginning of ninth grade, I was so just like concerned with what other people were going to think about me. I again was grappling with so much shame around being dyslexic and around how my brain works that I didn't really want anyone to know. I wanted to just kind of like be in my lane and just kind of like do my thing and just be quote unquote normal. So like a good example of this was a lot of students will have like an aide in the classroom, and it's just like a special little teacher that will kind of follow you around. Sometimes they'll take notes for you, or sometimes they just kind of help reinforce material that's being taught in class on a more one-to-one ratio. That was a huge thing that I pointed out that I did not want. And I'm sure Miss Connect can probably remember. But in ninth grade, I came in and was like, this is my boundary. I don't want this. I was so like worried, and I had such a negative connotation for my previous years of what that meant to have an aide or what other people were to think of me, and even just my own feelings about it. And then kind of fast forward a few years, I never did have an aide in the classroom, but I would so be open to it. I am so just like open to any help that I can be given in any way to better adapt myself so I can better learn and really truly be on an even playing field with everyone else, because that's truly what accommodations do, or at least how they serve in my life. They serve to allow me to be on the even playing field with all the other students. So I'm not having to work 6 hours more than everyone else. I can just work the same amount.
Yeah.
And so that transition was really big for me. And that mind shift, it took a few years for me to realize, okay, getting help is not weakness. It's actually strength. It's strength. And it's a way that I can succeed. So shifting that kind of perception in my head was really big for me.
And I think that's a great message to kind of give to anybody out there. Kind of just, we talk so much throughout this whole year of, everyone remote learning or hybrid learning, of just like the importance of asking for help in all different situations. And whether it's struggling with, a diagnosis of something, or just that, hey, I need a little extra help today. And normally I don't, but some weird stuff's happening in my life. It's just one of those things to be able as a high school student to have that progression and to kind of see. And one of the dirty little secrets of high school that they don't tell you when you start is that nobody care, like very few people care about other people. They're so concerned about themselves that like very rarely does that kind of stuff happen. Now, obviously there's drama with other people, don't get me wrong, but like in the end of the whole deal is like, 95% of the time, everyone's just concerned about themselves and nobody else. And they don't really care
True.
what else you got going on. So, I think your message of just kind of asking for help and being comfortable with that is so true. Cause, as you progress here, and we'll get into kind of the college stuff in a second, but I had a question that I was thinking of while you were talking. Is there ever just a moment where you're just like, not necessarily mad, but like you've made it to this point and you're like, I've had to work so hard
Yes.
compared to my peers of like what, I have, I'm in all the same classes and I know the work that they're doing, but like at the same time, it's like, man, like I really have to put in a lot more effort than everybody else.
I dealt with a lot in the beginning, especially right when I was diagnosed. I dealt with a lot of resentment. I was very resentful for, I just couldn't like understand why I wasn't diagnosed sooner. I felt kind of cheated. I felt like I missed out on a lot of formative experiences. A lot of dyslexia intervention happens when you're in elementary school, when you're learning and reading like everyone else. But I didn't have that. And so I felt like I had this weird feeling of what could have been. Like what could have been of if I learned how to read in a way that my brain works, if I got an intervention to be able to do that, how would I be feeling? Would I be needing all these audiobooks? Would I be dealing with so much of this shame? All these things. So I dealt with a lot of resentment in the beginning. And that has like very much like faded away. I've kind of, come to the belief of I found out when I was supposed to find out. And I really wouldn't change it for the world. Being dyslexic is it's not all of me, but it's definitely one of the best parts of me. It really, I believe, leads me to hopefully my passion and my purpose in this world. And it makes me a better person, makes me a more empathetic person. But in terms of sometimes just feeling tired, yeah, I'm human. Sometimes I just want to throw my hands up and be like, what the heck? Like you spent an hour on that. I spent 3 hours on that. Like,
yeah.
what the heck?
Or even when you're taking a test and you said that you have to do all these different things and the connections you're making, and then you see like the person next to you just zip right through it and be like, oh my gosh, like I would be like, there's got to be that feeling in your head. It's just like, come on, man. It's like, seriously, can we just yeah. So you're moving on, you're getting ready. So it's, near the end of May here, you're getting ready to graduate, which is fantastic and awesome. And, you're going to be moving on to Lafayette. So you're not leaving the Lehigh Valley, you're just moving to the opposite end of the valley here. So what do you hope that experience is going to be like for you? And do you think you're going to have to basically, like, obviously you're going to have another freshman year experience, but like, what do you think that freshman year experience will be compared to your freshman year experience, like coming into high school?
Honestly, I think it's going to be similar in some ways, but 100% different in other ways. I think I'm a different person than I was when I walked into Emmaus. I think I'm a more confident person. I think I'm a more empathetic person towards myself. I think I have so much compassion for other people, but I never really stopped to think, do I have compassion for myself and the importance of having compassion for myself so I can continue to have compassion for others. And so I think in some ways it'll be the same, as I mentioned, just kind of acclimating. It's a whole new experience. I've never been in college before. I don't know how the professors are going to be. I don't know how I'm going to manage needing to study at certain times and just, like, I'm just going to have to adapt how I do things and how I learn things to best succeed, right? So I know that's going to be the same, but it will be different in the way that I view myself. I know that my worth does not come from an academic grade or for a number. It comes from how I treat other people and how I treat myself, right? So if I continue to just treat myself with respect and treat other people with kindness and respect, no matter my grade in college, I know that I will succeed and I know that I will get to where I need to be. And that was different than it was in ninth grade. I think in ninth grade, I very much got swept up in the numbers of just, okay, like my worth and my success comes from these academic numbers, when in reality it doesn't. So I think my perception of myself and my perception of succeeding, how I think succeeding is so much different. So I think in that way, I hope to just continue with self-growth, as well as just being passionate about learning. I never want to stop learning. So I'm really excited to keep doing that.
And you said it looks like you're going to major in psychology, and basically
Yes.
Listening to you for the last 2 minutes of that answer sounds like you're already well on your way to understanding a lot about psychology. But was there was what you kind of went through and all the different changes and things you had to do? Was that kind of the influence to kind of get you to go down that road of psychology?
Yeah, so I kind of have a funny story. So as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a special education teacher, and that was directly off of my experience of just I can feel with these students. I know what they're feeling, and I really feel like I can connect to them, and I can be that person that maybe I didn't have for someone. And then I decided in 11th grade that I wanted to take an AP course, and I thought, oh, cool, like AP Psych, like this seems wonderful. I took that, it 100% like swept me off my feet. And I was like, what is this world of just questioning, of just being curious all the time? And there's never really true answers. It's just constantly developing and changing. And I loved it. So once I took that class, I got swept into all the books you could read about psychology, all the podcasts, just everything. And I decided, okay, I love education and I may do something later in education. I could volunteer. I could also do a lot of psychology within education. So I thought I could kind of mesh those together and focus on kind of just the study of people in psychology.
And, just listening to you, like I can just hear the passion and what you have for it. It's just really awesome. And this is kind of one of the cool things about touching in with 12th graders here is like they've now gone through high school. They kind of have those like real world, real life experiences, and they kind of have made that choice, or they've had the opportunity to make the choice of where they want to go. I've heard many times, and I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but there's a weirdly disproportionate amount of like CEOs and founders of companies that have dyslexia. Yes. Because of the, that process of thinking, or I hate the phrase, but thinking outside the box, or being super creative and doing all that kind of stuff. So it's really, listening to you, I can just, only envision these types of things for you based on your experiences and based on the way that you're kind of approaching this whole thing. So in our final question here, you've left so much for everybody here throughout the whole entire episode, but if you were to kind of sum up your message in like a phrase or something to kind of for upcoming 8th graders or current 9th graders to kind of tackle this crazy freshman year and kind of where it can take you, what would you kind of leave everyone with?
It's a fantastic question, and I could have so many answers. I think I would probably say to incoming 9th graders, don't be afraid to be yourself, but more importantly, don't shy away from your curiosity, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable. I think being vulnerable in many ways. So for me, like in 9th grade, an example of being vulnerable was being extremely open about my struggles with dyslexia, right? But for you, being vulnerable may just be sitting at the table with someone that you don't know and just saying hi and wanting to be friends. So kind of allow yourself to be vulnerable. And in that, I can promise you that you'll find connections and passions that you maybe didn't even know that will lead you on to your future years. So allow yourself to always question and never shy away from that, and be vulnerable with others, and allow yourself to be authentic and see kind of where that takes you.
All right. So, we can't sum it up better than you just did. So Grace, thank you so much for joining us here on the 9th grade experience. I'm like, your story is amazing. I hope people listening to it, whether you have dyslexia, whether you don't have it, whether you know somebody that has it, or you're just a regular, 8th grade student coming up and you're trying to find your way. I think anyone that listens to this can identify with different things that you talked about during this episode. So thank you so much. Good luck at Lafayette. I guess go beat Lehigh and do all, all the other things and do what you need to do. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been an amazing opportunity.